It's a chilling statistic. Almost half of all cold cases, they just stay unsolved.
Yeah, it's a really sobering thought.
It is.
And when you think about the sheer volume of cases out there, um, it makes you wonder, how many families are still searching for those answers.
Still waiting for justice, yeah.
Exactly. And today's case, the murder of William Alvarado, it's one of those cases that really sticks with you.
It does. And the setting itself adds another layer of intrigue, right? The John J. Ashton Towers in Willimantic, Connecticut.
Yeah, you've got this bustling public housing complex, over 100 residents, this kind of microcosm of life. Different backgrounds, different stories, all intersecting under one roof.
So back on September 7th, 2016, first responders, they walk into this building, and what they find, it shakes this community to its core.
It was a brutal scene.
Yeah.
William, this man known for his kindness, his generosity, found murdered in his own apartment.
And the details of the crime scene itself, they're particularly jarring, especially when you contrast it with William's gentle nature.
Absolutely. I mean, he was found slumped over in his chair, single stab wound to his neck, blood everywhere.
And no signs of forced entry, no obvious robbery, nothing.
It's like the killer just vanished into thin air.
Melted away into the very fabric of the building.
That's a great way to put it. And that image right there, it highlights the immense challenge that investigators faced from the very beginning.
Right, because how do you track down a killer
Yeah.
in a place where everybody knows everybody, where loyalties are so intertwined, and where the fear of speaking out might be stronger than the desire for justice?
It's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces, for sure.
And to make things even more complicated, it seems that William's kindness, the very trait that made him so beloved, might have also made him vulnerable.
Absolutely. William was known throughout the towers as someone who would give you the shirt off his back.
Really?
He would often lend money, give gifts, even when he could barely afford it. His family describes him as having almost a childlike innocence, someone who saw the good in everyone, and perhaps to a fault.
It's heartbreaking to think that his trusting nature might have been exploited.
It is, and it makes those weeks leading up to his murder even more tragic. William confided in his brother, expressed fears for his safety, even requested a transfer from the towers.
So he knew something wasn't right.
It seems that way, yeah, like he sensed a looming danger.
And speaking of warning signs, there's this incident with William's stove burners. They were mysteriously turned on.
Yeah, that's a strange one. Some believe it was an attempt to intimidate him, send a message.
Right.
While others speculate it was a ploy to frame him, knowing his trusting nature might make him an easy target.
So to unravel this web of relationships and potential motives, we need to start with those individuals who were closest to William, right? Those who frequented his life there in the towers.
Makes sense.
And one name that immediately comes to mind is Carmen, a woman nearly 30 years younger than William, who lived just a few doors down.
Yeah, Carmen's connection to William is definitely intriguing.
Yeah.
She had a key to his apartment, visited him frequently, sometimes even late at night, and she claimed to be the last person to see him alive.
But William's family, they paint a different picture. They believe Carmen was taking advantage of William's generosity, accepting money and gifts while possibly stringing him along romantically.
It's a classic tale of potential manipulation, isn't it? A younger woman preying on an older man's loneliness and kindness.
And adding fuel to the fire, there were whispers of Carmen spending time with other men in the towers.
Yeah, suggesting a possible love triangle or rivalry.
So that element, it injects a dose of jealousy and possessiveness into the equation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, was there someone who saw William as a rival for Carmen's affections? Someone who might have felt threatened by his presence in her life?
It's a question that would lead investigators down a winding path, interviewing men who were connected to Carmen, including a military veteran living down the hall, and a man known only as Scarface. Imagine the tension in those interviews, the suspicions simmering beneath the surface, as detectives try to piece together this puzzle of William's final days.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is, and in William's case, it seems the answers, they might be buried deep within the walls of the towers, shrouded in a culture of silence and fear.
That's a very real possibility, and it's one of the biggest hurdles in cases like this, overcoming that wall of silence.
But just when the trail seemed to run cold, a glimmer of hope emerges, and from a most unexpected source, a prison inmate who had seen William's case featured on a deck of playing cards.
Talk about a twist of fate.
It really is. It's like the cards themselves were dealing a hand in this investigation.
It's a reminder that even in the most hopeless of cases, the pursuit of justice can find a way.
So this scribbled message on a piece of prison stationery, it breathes new life into William's case, and it leads investigators to a new person of interest, someone with a dark history lurking within the towers.
This could be huge.
It could, but before we dive into that new lead, let's rewind a bit and delve deeper into the crime scene itself. What did those first responders encounter that night? What clues were left behind in that silent apartment?
Well, the details, they paint a grim picture. The murder weapon was never found, believed to be a blade at least 9 inches long.
Wow.
And despite numerous knives being present in William's apartment, none of them matched the fatal wound.
So the killer took it with them?
It seems that way, yeah. And then there's a single drop of blood found in the kitchen sink.
Just one.
Just one. A tantalizing piece of evidence hinting at the killer's presence but not revealing their identity.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle in the dark, isn't it? Each piece offers a glimpse into the events of that night, but the full picture remains frustratingly elusive.
You got it. And that's what makes this case so compelling.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
We'll be back. Especially when you consider the context of the towers, right? This wasn't some sterile, isolated environment. This was a place where people were coming and going, shared spaces, a sense of community.
So trying to isolate that single drop of blood, definitively link it to the killer, that must have been a monumental task.
Oh, absolutely. And it speaks to the limitations of forensic science back then.
Right, this is 2016.
Exactly. DNA analysis was a powerful tool even then, but it wasn't the instant definitive answer you see in those crime dramas.
Right, not like you just plug it into a computer and boom, you got your killer.
Yeah, Hollywood definitely takes some liberties there.
So even with that blood sample, investigators were still facing a long, painstaking process of analysis, comparison, elimination.
Precisely. And in the meantime, they had to rely on more traditional investigative methods, witness interviews, building a timeline, and of course, scrutinizing those individuals who were closest to William.
And that brings us back to Carmen. We've talked about the suspicions surrounding her relationship with William, the potential for manipulation, the whispers of jealousy and rivalry. But what about her demeanor during the investigation? Did anything about her behavior raise red flags for the police?
Well, according to the police reports, Carmen's statements were often contradictory and confusing. For example, she initially told police that she went to William's apartment around 2:00 a.m. to make coffee.
To make coffee.
Yeah, which seemed rather odd given the time.
I can see why that would raise some eyebrows.
Right. It makes you wonder about her true motives for being there at that hour.
It does.
And beyond the inconsistencies in her story, her overall demeanor during those interviews was described as mumbled, quiet, even rambling at times. The reports even mentioned that she continued talking to herself after leaving the interview room.
Those details, they paint a pretty unsettling picture, almost as if she was struggling with some internal turmoil, maybe grappling with guilt or fear, or even a sense of detachment from reality.
That's certainly a possibility, and it's important to remember we're only getting a glimpse of Carmen through the lens of police reports and witness statements.
Right.
There might be layers to her personality, her motivations that we can only speculate about.
It's a reminder that even in cases where guilt or innocence seems clear-cut, there's often a human story beneath the surface, a complexity that defies easy categorization.
Absolutely. And while Carmen certainly remained a person of interest, the lack of concrete physical evidence connecting her to the crime scene meant that the investigation couldn't solely focus on her.
So while they were trying to untangle the web surrounding Carmen, they were also pursuing those other leads, right? What about those other men who were connected to her? Did the investigation reveal anything about their potential involvement?
Well, Carmen's boyfriend at the time was quickly cleared as a suspect after a thorough interview and DNA comparison, but the investigation into the other men, the military veteran and the individual known as Scarface, proved to be much more challenging.
I imagine trying to gather information within the towers, a place where relationships were so complex, potentially fraught with tension. It must have been like navigating a minefield.
You're telling me the transient nature of the residents, the prevalence of mental health issues within the community, all of that created a unique set of challenges for investigators.
Right, because witnesses might have been unreliable memories clouded by personal struggles, and then there's the fear of retaliation, keeping some people from speaking freely.
Exactly. It's like the very fabric of the community, the close-knit nature of life in the towers. It became both a help and a hindrance to the investigation.
On the one hand, everyone knows everyone else, so there's this wealth of potential information.
Right.
But on the other hand, those same close ties, they can create a wall of silence, a reluctance to betray confidence or risk becoming a target themselves.
It's a classic dilemma in cases like this, balancing the pursuit of justice with protecting a community that might be grappling with its own internal struggles and fears.
And in Williams' case, the investigation was further complicated by the fact that he was so well liked he didn't have any known enemies. No history of conflicts or disputes that would point to an obvious suspect.
That's right. They were essentially searching for a killer in a community that had seemingly lost one of its brightest lights, a man who was known for his kindness and compassion.
It's a heartbreaking irony, isn't it?
It really is. And as the months went by with no major breakthroughs, the case began to grow cold. That initial flurry of activity, the interviews, the forensic analysis, all seemed to lead to dead ends.
But then, as we mentioned earlier, that glimmer of hope emerges from that most unexpected source, that prison inmate who saw Williams' case featured on a deck of playing cards.
Talk about a stroke of luck.
It really is.
It was a twist of fate that injected new energy into the investigation, offering a potential lead that had been overlooked before.
It's amazing how seemingly random events can sometimes play a pivotal role in shaping the course of justice.
It really is, and it reminds us that we should never underestimate the power of even the smallest detail.
So what did this inmate reveal? What new information did he bring to the table?
Well, he claimed to have specific knowledge about Williams' murder, pointing the finger at a new suspect, someone with a known presence in the towers, and more disturbingly, a history of preying on vulnerable residents.
Wait, so while investigators were initially focused on Carmen and those connected to her, this new information suggests that there might have been a completely different motive at play.
Precisely, this new suspect, according to the inmate's tip, had a reputation for exploiting the elderly and the disabled, using intimidation threats, even violence, to get what he wanted.
That paints a much darker picture of the environment within the towers, doesn't it? It suggests that Williams' murder might not have been an isolated incident, but rather a tragic consequence of a predator operating within a vulnerable community.
It's a chilling thought, and it certainly raised the stakes for the investigation.
So with this new information, what steps did the investigators take? Did they immediately confront this new suspect?
Well, they had to proceed cautiously. Remember, they were dealing with a tip from a prison inmate, someone who might have had their own motivations for coming forward. It was crucial to corroborate the information to build a case that could stand up in court.
So while this new lead was promising, it also presented a new set of challenges.
You got it.
How did they go about verifying the inmate's claims and connecting this new suspect to Williams' murder?
They revisited old leads, re-interviewed witnesses, and perhaps most importantly, they took a fresh look at the physical evidence, including that crucial drop of blood found in Williams' kitchen sink.
And remember that grainy surveillance footage from the towers, the footage that was initially thought to be corrupted.
Yes. That became a key piece of the puzzle as well, thanks to advancements in video enhancement technology. Investigators were able to revisit that footage, meticulously analyzing each frame, hoping to spot the killer or anyone who might have witnessed something suspicious that night.
It's like getting a second chance to look back in time to potentially uncover a detail that was missed the first time around.
It really is a testament to the persistence of those investigators, their refusal to let the case fade into obscurity.
And with this renewed focus, with technology offering a fresh perspective on the evidence, there was a sense that justice for William might finally be within reach.
That's the hope.
But before we delve into the current status of the investigation, the potential impact of this new suspect, and the ongoing efforts to bring William's killer to justice, let's pause for a moment and reflect on the man himself, who is William Alvarado beyond the tragedy of his death. What stories can we uncover about the life he lived within the walls of the towers?
Yeah, he was really a pillar of that community. You know, the bank of the building, always willing to lend a few dollars, share a meal, or just offer a kind word.
It's hard to imagine someone wanting to harm him.
I know, it's truly tragic. But, you know, as we dig deeper into the investigation, a darker side of the tower starts to emerge.
What do you mean?
Well, this new suspect, the one identified by the prison inmate, remember we're calling him Mr. X.
Right.
He had a history of preying on the vulnerable residents in the towers.
So not just William.
No, there were whispers of intimidation threats, even physical altercations, all aimed at those who were perceived as easy targets.
That's awful.
But
It paints a much more sinister picture of the environment within those walls.
it does, and it suggests that William's murder might not have been an isolated incident, but rather a tragic consequence of a predator operating within a vulnerable community.
So while the initial focus was on those closest to William, this new information suggests a much more systemic issue, a potential pattern of abuse.
Exactly. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, uncovering a hidden reality that had been lurking beneath the surface.
So with this new information, with Mr. X now firmly in the crosshairs of the investigation, what steps did investigators take? How did they go about building a case against him?
Well, they started by meticulously corroborating the information from that prison inmate, revisiting old leads, re-interviewing witnesses, and speaking to residents who might have been victims of Mr. X's intimidation tactics.
I can't imagine those conversations were easy.
No, not at all. It takes a lot of skill and empathy to gain the trust of people who have been through such traumatic experiences.
And amidst these delicate conversations, there were also some major advancements in forensic technology that offered new hope for the investigation. That grainy surveillance footage from the tower's pairs. The footage that was initially thought to be corrupted, remember?
Oh, yeah, that becomes a game changer.
So,
With new video enhancement technology, investigators were able to go back and analyze that footage frame by frame, hoping to catch a glimpse of the killer or anyone who might have been present at the time of the murder.
wow. So they're essentially getting a second chance to look back in time.
Precisely, and it's incredible what they were able to extract from that footage, even though it was initially thought to be unusable.
Did they find anything significant?
While the specifics of what they found haven't been publicly released, there are reports that the enhanced footage provided valuable insights, potentially placing Mr. X at the scene of the crime.
So that's huge, right? They now have a potential eyewitness account, albeit a digital one, that could corroborate the prison inmate's tip and build a stronger case against Mr. X.
It's a major breakthrough and a testament to how technology can play a crucial role in solving cold cases.
Absolutely. So with all this new information, with the focus now firmly on Mr. X, where does the investigation stand today? Has anyone been charged with William's murder?
As of today, no charges have been filed, but the investigation is still very much active, and it's clear that Mr. X is the primary suspect.
So there's still hope for justice for William.
Absolutely. The fact that the case has been revitalized, that new leads have emerged, and that technology has provided a fresh perspective on the evidence, it's a testament to the dedication of those who refuse to let William's memory fade.
And for William's family, for those who loved and cherished him, that persistence offers a glimmer of hope, a belief that one day they might finally see justice served.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we must never give up on the pursuit of truth and accountability.
And for William Alvarado, a man whose life was tragically cut short, that pursuit might be the most fitting tribute to the kindness and generosity he embodied.
Well said. And as we conclude this deep dive into the William Alvarado case, we want to leave you with this thought. If you have any information, no matter how seemingly insignificant, that might shed light on this case, please contact the authorities.
Your tip could be the missing piece of the puzzle that finally brings William's killer to justice. And if you found this deep dive insightful, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more in-depth explorations of compelling cases and thought-provoking stories.
We'll continue to bring you unique perspectives, expert analysis, and a commitment to uncovering the truth one deep dive at a time.